This is Tarot Times with Heidi. I'm Heidi, and you're in my space. Should I tell the story about how I opened?
That's a great way
Oh
to
my
start.
god! On my 40th birthday, on the new moon, the whole store opened up, and that's when I first got my space. I was reading for 10 years before that, but not here. This is the first place with like a door. I don't study tarot theory, but I've been told that I practice a form of tarot called soul tarot, and it's free will based. So looking at the idea of outcomes, not improbabilities, instead of like a fixed future. For me, tarot is a form of like narrative therapy. I feel like it's witch therapy. I feel like it's a way of looking at feelings and situations in like an old way. That was much more about who you are and what you're doing, and I feel like it's a tool of illumination. So it's not really about getting a solution or getting to the bottom of a problem, but just looking very clearly about what you're dealing with. I personally think tarot is super healing. One way that I thought I was really healing was around gender, because I'm gender fluid and most gender norms don't really work, because I'm not really one or the other. I just kind of, sometimes I'm maybe more of one or more of the other, but most of the time I'm kind of embodying all of them. And I found tarot really, really healing, because when they're talking about the prince and the princess and the queen and the king, when I first got the decks, I didn't like it, but as I studied it, I realized what they're talking about is like your lunar and your solar, or their divine feminine, divine masculine, your yin and your yang, which as applied to gender studies is problematic, but as looking at like energies in the body, I'm kind of like, I'm okay with it, because the prince and the princess is immature yin and yang principles. The queen and the king are mature yin and yang principles. Like the lovers is your inner masculine and your inner feminine, like marrying onto your higher self and feeling like a peace within yourself. It's not about like a romantic heteronormative setup. And I think there's been a real colonization of the tarot, and sort of a heteronormative lens being put on the tarot. And then for myself, what I found was really healing is that as I got into the tarot and got into the deeper stories of the tarot, the history of the tarot, what it meant, you decolonize with the deck. My decolonization journey is really linked to the deck, because the tarot existed pre-Christianity. So it's being someone who's of European descent. I don't have anyone in my family besides my cousin who is not a Christian. Got maybe 2 non-Christians in my family. Everyone else is either working for the church, in the church, working for the Christian schools, which is, they're doing a lot of good there, but it's also, it's like a little package of life before the church. And like, what were we aligned with? We weren't aligned to like a Christian God. We were aligned to like nature and being a part of nature, being one with nature. Like, you are the earth, you are the air, you are the fire, you are the water, you are the wands, you are like the pentacles, you are the cups, you are the swords. Like, you are, I don't think I said them in order there, but like, you are like the 4 elements are in the 4 minor arcana. Like, and all those things are basically your soul journey. So when you're looking at the cards and you're looking at these different elements, you're looking at different parts of yourself. All right, so I'm hard of hearing. I found out about 2 years ago, and I've been involved in intuition like way before I got into tarot. This is a very cultivated part of me, and I have a lot of like quote unquote magical friends, people involved in all kinds of different spiritual walks. And when I came out as hard of hearing, when I started understanding how my physical interface with the world was like different than the hearing community, I got a lot of responses from people saying it's like your intuition got really deep and then your physical ears like dimmed. So like the idea that my physical hearing decreased as my spiritual hearing increased, which it felt a lot like a disability fantasy. Not everyone who's hard of hearing is spiritual. There are very pragmatic, atheistic, and very scientific people that are hard of hearing. There are like not all people who are hard of hearing are more intuitive. Not all people who are hard of hearing are more spiritual. And my sense, it also felt like a tokenizing of the skills. Like this is a skill set. It's a spiritual trade. You know, learning the tarot is a spiritual trade. it's like plumbing, except you're learning the cards, but you're also learning the energies. And then when you just call it, well, it's just because you're deaf that you have more intuition. It's just like it feels very belittling, and also a way of putting intuition in a bit of a box. Like, being different means that you don't have the same access points or enjoyability factors or ways to engage. And either you sit there and you feel sorry for yourself, or you do things that entertain you and you can meet. So for me, that was like drawing, meditation, being in nature, being by myself, being with people who weren't afraid of me or worried about me or scared of me, and just nurturing that part of me. So when people talk about, oh, you're a tarot reader because you're hard of hearing, it's just like, no. Like, that was a choice. It might have been pushed to the front because of a survival need to be entertained, be engaged in some way, but it was a choice. And when I think about staying away from the edges, making judgment calls on things, like, I do have a strong set of like political beliefs, and like I'm highly idealistic, I'm all these things, but if I get really hard-lined about something, I miss the conversation. I project my feelings on the other person. I don't hear them. I don't listen to them. And as a tarot reader, that is like the number one thing you have to do, is stay neutral. You have to stay neutral because you have to be in that you have to hold that person's energy body. You have to hold the space. I've asked psychic consent, which allows me to see more than I would normally feel comfortable seeing, because it's consensual and it is a skill. So it's like a different set of eyes you're opening. So when you're doing a reading, you are engaging on all those other levels. And if I bring my judgment to the table, I miss the beauty of that person. I miss the conversation, and I can't actually facilitate any kind of real, genuine connection or intimacy or illumination, because I'm bringing my agenda to the table. Being in witness is one of the most crucial things about this practice, which doesn't feel magical. It doesn't feel special. It feels really boring, because you have to just be in witness. It's also what allows a person to step out of controlling their own reality. You have to be responsible for yourself, but you're not trying to control a situation or get a certain outcome. You are just with that person. And when you're just with that person, then what they really need to be seen and heard for, or a pain that they're not sharing that is linked to it, will come to the surface. And because you're not trying to veer away from it or veer towards it, it can just be there. And that is very healing for people. And it's healing for me as the person that's holding the space, because nothing ever goes one way. Liminality is an academic term that's often used to describe people or things or places being in between things. It's sort of like an uncomfortable spot, really. I always think of it like the doorways or the entryways or the porches or of any space, because you're not in that space yet and you're outside of it, but yet those liminal spaces for me are the most interesting, because everything happens in there. Everyone goes through those spaces, everyone leaves those spaces, and it's in those intersections that it kind of gets juicy, because it's not a part of the main narrative, but it's not outside of the main narrative. It can also be an accessibility issue, because you're not in the room, you're not part of that main conversation. When you're in that main conversation, when you're in that main area, then things are on the line, you're under pressure to perform, you have to do it a certain way, and those spaces aren't necessarily accessible to folks, or it's too much mentally, physically, intellectually, spiritually, for any number of reasons. And so this idea of like being on the edges, or a liminality, can be a blessing and a curse. It can kind of be both. But I often find there's a sense of internalized liminality, where you think that your discourse is so outside of the normative discourse you can't enter. It's kind of like self-editing, because when I have just been like, whatever, I might not be invited to this party, quote unquote, but I'm going and I'm showing up as my whole self and I bring my whole self and I have these amazing conversations because everyone is liminal, everyone has these layers, everyone is intersectional. Tarot is all about liminality. Tarot is about the space in between the spaces, or between this world and the other world. It's completely liminal. Tarot is literally taking the underworld and bringing it into this world so that you can see and integrate it. It's bringing in factors you're not aware of, expanding your awareness to see a bigger picture. And it's that power of integrating that liminality that allows that person to feel empowered by the tarot. Like, oh my goodness, now I understand these are the hidden factors. This is why I'm feeling pushed here, because these are the things that are setting me up. And now I can interact in a way that's really responsible and clear and empowered. You know, you might still be in a shitty situation. Ethically, morally, I'm not arguing that there's not like places of not being in power. But if you are aware of them, then you're not just being confused or blustered. Like, you know what's going on and you have an empowered stance. You can take your power back in that place. Mm-hmm. Magic is very hard to define. My personal view, and this is sort of supported by the tarot, truthfully, because all of the world, your entire journey from the moment you start it to the time you finish it, and even in your sub journeys, like when your journey of air, your journey of fire, your journey of water, your journey of earth, those like sort of subsections of your journey, all of it is considered magical. There's no part that's outside of magic. Everything is a part of the whole. You can't just divvy it up and say that certain parts of your life are less magical, like brushing your teeth is less magical. No, I have my teeth are getting healthier, that's magic. You know, that's practical magic. I don't have gingivitis because I floss every day, that's practical magic. Yeah, there's nothing you can take out of it. Practical magic is the things that people don't generally think of magical because they pass. They pass, you know. Having a good relationship, feeling protected and safe and seen in your relationship, and the protection that gives you in your mental health is a form of practical magic. You do things daily, like showing up for your partner, showing up for your friends, cultivating a good container, listening to them whether it's enjoyable for you or not. It's not just about your entertainment, it's about developing a relationship. Relationships are alive. You know, there's you, there's your partner or your friend, and then there's your relationship, your third body, and that you're taking care of that third space. You know, and that third space is what actually is holding your relationship with this other person. That's an incredibly basic concept, this idea of common and uncommon senses. It's kind of redundant, actually, because when something's about to happen and it's really weird, people will feel it in their stomach. They're like, I don't feel right about this. This idea of common and uncommon senses have more to do about like acceptable and unacceptable senses, which I think goes back to things like the witch hunt and like the giving away of your personal power to like a more of a structured sense of like organizing your spirituality. People step outside of their personal power and their personal idea of what's right and wrong spiritually. They're easier to control, and it's really easy to follow God when you don't believe that you're part of that. It's really easy to follow a ruler when you've given up your own power inside yourself and you're not autonomous. It's important for people to know who they are and what their truth is. It's also important for people to get along and know that it's just not just about you and what you think your truth is, and be willing to communicate and everyone's equal, have that equality and that staying away from the edges, being able to talk and have radical empathy for each other and be willing to sit with your triggers, being witness even when you're triggered and you're like, I can't believe you're saying that because this brings up all these blah, 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 blah. Like, it's really important to stay neutral, but also to recognize that you're more than what you see. Like, this world is more than what we see, and it's important to be humble to that. When the decks are there, Yeah, the lore of the tarot is that each deck has the imprint of the person who made it, and the imprint of all the hands that have ever touched it. The oils on the deck are really important, which is also the reasoning behind, like, the person has to be there to touch the deck to do the reading. That's where that comes from. Although I practice differently because of the pandemic, but that aside. And then the third one is that each tarot has a spirit. So you have this physical object, but then you have a spirit in the tarot that's helping you through it. And you can feel the energy of each deck. Like, it's very palatable for people. So when they come into the cave, I get them to not just visually choose the decks based on what they have on them, like what cloth they have, what wrapping they have, but to put their hands over top of each deck. So they don't even know what kind of deck they're choosing. They don't know if it's the Rider-Waite or if it's some other piece or if it's... they don't know. I actually don't have the Mother Peace deck because it chose someone else, but obviously I miss it. But they're choosing because of what they're having resonance with. And so what is the deck choosing them? What deck is choosing to work with them? So the consent of the decks, essentially. Like, the decks get to choose who they're working with, and they essentially put their bodies forward. So when people are trying to choose a deck based on the claws, you won't feel it's like you're putting your hand on someone who doesn't want you to touch them. Like, even if they don't move, they're not receiving your touch. And when it's the same thing when they're choosing the deck. If they're not choosing a deck that wants them, the deck will kind of just like not move. And when the deck is choosing them, it feels like they're jumping into their arms, and the person will put them on their heart and be like, yes, and then put them down and feel like you can feel the happiness, basically the third body, the person, the deck, and the third body of wanting to work together. You're always processing something. You're always becoming something and letting go of something. You're always becoming something else, so the idea of transmutation. And that speaks again to the decks, like, you're always going from one archetype to the next. If you're in the World, you're moving to the Fool. If you're in the Fool, you're moving to Magician. You're moving to High Priestess. You're moving to the Empress, to the Emperor, to the Hierophant. You're always in process. Even if you feel like, oh, I'm just jumping around and I'm so random. If you come into a session and you start talking, everything is connected. Everything is connected, and everything is moving from one element to another. And even if you're processing an idea, you're going from one neural synapse to another one, and if you're building a new thought, you're literally weaving together new ways of thinking. Like, it does feel weird. It does feel like you're breaking something down and creating something new, because you're always unlearning ways of the past and moving into something that you haven't done before. And if you're not, it's very stagnant, and that's when people come in and they feel unhappy, because it doesn't feel. If you're stagnant, you're losing that energy, right? You're not going to be well. You can also be on overdrive, but there's a happy medium. Like, you can't always turn your compost and expect that to work either. You have to let it sit too.